Hey folks, welcome back for another build video where we're looking at a drone and turret skill build that is focused around the Umbra initiative gear set. So while I understand that might sound counterintuitive, trust me on this one, it actually works really well when paired together, and some pretty obvious modifications as you can see with the core attributes. So getting into this one, we have everybody's favorite, the Technician Specialization, specifically for the amped talent, giving us that +1 skill tier. It's just incredibly beneficial on any sort of hybrid build. It gives you a lot of flexibility with your other core attributes. On top of that, we also benefit from the overclocked CPU talent, giving us +10% skill damage, and actually the emergency patch talent, which ordinarily isn't that big of a deal, but given that this is a hybrid skill build where our skills don't necessarily have the most health on them, the emergency patch allows our armor kits to also apply to all friendly skill proxies within 10 meters. So that's something to keep in mind as you're in combat. If you're getting low on health, if your skills are getting low on health, you can apply an armor kit to try and keep them out just that little bit longer. For a primary weapon, we have another hybrid favorite here. It's the Capacitor Assault Rifle, which of course comes with the Capacitance talent. Shooting an enemy build stacks up to a cap of 40. Each stack grants 1.5% skill damage, and after 5 seconds, stacks decay at 1 per second. And then all importantly down there, for each skill tier gained, you get 7.5% weapon damage. So essentially for every skill tier, you get half a weapon damage core as well. That second paragraph in particular is what makes this so great as a hybrid skill build piece, because you can maintain those skill tiers while still having a decent amount of weapon damage coming out of your primary weapon. The secondary weapon here is much more of a preferential pick. Personally, I've gone with the Harmony high-end rifle because it comes with the perfectly in-sync talent. Hitting an enemy grants +20% skill damage for 5 seconds, and using a non-shield skill or damaging an enemy with a skill, which you'll be doing a lot, grants 20% weapon damage for 5 seconds. And those damage increases are doubled when both buffs are active at the same time, which, as long as you're firing with this weapon and your skills are out, should be almost the entire time. So essentially you're getting +40% skill damage and +40% weapon damage when using this weapon. The reason why I've gone with the Harmony over the test subject is just to diversify the ammo supplies that we're using. So if you ever feel like you're getting low on the assault rifle, I find it's nice to switch to the Harmony. You can maintain both skill and weapon damage, and it also gives you a longer range method of engagement if you need that as well. But obviously, as with most secondary weapons on builds, they're a lot more preferential than the primary, so if you want to go with something like a shotgun, maybe even with in-sync on it, that would be a good close range weapon to deal with rushers. But honestly, on this build, if everything is firing effectively, you really shouldn't have that many close range encounters unless you're specifically seeking them out. And in that vein, for our sidearm, we've gone with a Card 45, not the named TDI card custom, because as you'll see later, we're already at 6 skill tiers with both our primary and secondary weapons, so we don't need the unique +1 skill tier provided by that weapon. Instead, I just like the feel of the Card 45, so I've gone with that sidearm, but pick any sidearm you prefer. The real thing I'm recommending here is the Future Perfect talent. Weapon kills grant +1 skill tier for 15 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. But because we're at skill tier 6, that second paragraph is actually what applies here. Weapon kills at skill tier 6 grant overcharge for 15 seconds, and then the overcharge cooldown is 90 seconds. But primarily the sidearm here is used as a method of overcharging your skills for those crucial moments where you need them to be super effective for a short period of time. And I say short period, but obviously 15 seconds is a very significant amount of time for a particular encounter. So if you need to finish off a particularly hard boss or deal with a large wave of enemies, I really like Future Perfect on the sidearm as a great way to just proc overcharge, get that 15 seconds of increased damage for both of your skills, and then maybe switch it back to your primary weapon to apply your own weapon damage output as well. For our mask, we have our first piece of Umbra Initiative. We'll go ahead and run through all of the Umbra Initiative benefits here, and then we'll reiterate them a little bit later on, but we're just going to focus on it here. What are the benefits of this gear set, and why might it lend itself to a turret and drone build? So at 2 pieces, you get +15% critical hit chance. That's particularly effective on a hybrid build where you're really lacking the normal sources of crit hit chance and damage. So having a gear set that gives you one in the first 2 pieces is a really nice way to stack some of that chance, so you don't have to bleed it all into critical hit chance just to get the effectiveness. At 3 pieces, you get +30% reload speed, which is a really underrated way to maintain your damage output during the length of an encounter. But while both of those bonuses are beneficial, obviously the real centerpiece of any Umbra Initiative build is the 4-piece bonus from the shadows into the light. I'm not going to read all the specific numbers out to you because that is an incredibly long set of paragraphs, but the basic premise here is that while you're in cover, you're going to gain stacks that will then increase your critical hit damage and RPM, rounds per minute, once you leave cover. And when you're out of cover, you're going to gain stacks that'll increase your armor regen when you get back into cover. So this is very much an oscillating talent. When you're in cover, you're gaining stacks to be used out of cover, and when you're out of cover, you're gaining stacks that can be used when you're in cover. And just as crucially there, the stacks that you use when you're out of cover are incredibly offensively beneficial, and the stacks that you use when you're in cover. So I find the best tempo of this build is to be gearing up, getting ready to go when you're in cover, then blasting out of cover, using those stacks, and then if you take some hits, you need to get some armor back, you pop back into cover, get that armor regen going, and then once you're back at full health, your offensive stacks will be back at full. You can pop back out and use all of that extra critical hit damage and RPM to really just take down enemies that your skills haven't already finished off. And the reason I think this works particularly well with a drone and turret build is because of the way that you're going in and out of cover. Given that this also sports tier 6 skills, the majority of the attention isn't focused on you. You can really get into a rhythm of going in and out of cover, maximizing the effectiveness of both of the stack pools. And it really just does feel incredibly gratifying to use this talent, which is inherently hybrid focused, and seeing it really shine. So I think I've waxed poetically enough. Let's get into the attributes here. For the core attribute, you can see we've re-rolled that to a skill tier, which means you will have to do a little bit of farming for this build. As you can see, both the mask and the knee pads down there have a skill tier as their core attribute, which means you're going to have to get either critical hit chance or critical hit damage as a naturally rolled secondary attribute. It'll take a little bit of farming, but given that it's a gear set, you're only looking for one good roll. And as you can see there, it doesn't have to be maximized to be effective. So it shouldn't take too long to get these pieces. But I did want to mention that obviously you have critical hit chance and then critical hit damage in the mod slot. Obviously with any crit hit adjacent build, your particular mods are going to depend on what numbers you're running for chance and damage. Just keep in mind the basic formula that'll flash up on screen, and that should give you a good basis to go from. On top of that, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and note that the backpack, chest piece, and the holster here are all named items. So obviously they have to go in those slots. So the other 3 pieces that you have, the mask, the gloves, and the knee pads, have to be Umbra Initiative. But as for which ones you have to roll to a skill tier, it really doesn't matter. So when you're farming for those pieces, you're looking for masks, gloves, and knee pads of Umbra Initiative that roll with that red attribute of either critical hit chance or critical hit damage. Again, that depends on your particular math, which one you're looking for. But once you get 2 pieces in either the mask, glove, or knee pad slot that fit that description, all you need is a 3rd naturally rolled Umbra Initiative piece with weapon damage on it, and then you can re-roll the secondary attribute of that piece to whatever you need it to be. With that, we get into our backpack here. It is the hybrid staple, the Ninja Bike Messenger backpack, 3 core attributes, and a talent that just lends itself so well to so many hybrid builds. Resourceful slots in with any equipped gear set and or brand set item to fulfill a requirement towards unlocking gear set and brand set bonuses, and it can and does unlock bonuses from multiple sets simultaneously. So as you can imagine, that's why we only need 3 pieces of Umbra Initiative here to get the 4-piece bonus. And on top of that, we have critical hit damage here in the mod slot, though again, your mileage will vary depending on what your crit hit numbers are, whether this one is chance or damage. For chest piece, we've gone with Caesar's Guard. That is the named Empress International piece, and because of our backpack here, we get both the 1 and 2 piece brand bonuses of skill health and skill damage. As I mentioned in the specialization talk, our skills are going to have the most skill health on them. So particularly for our drone, that first brand bonus is really nice to have. It helps keep it out a little bit longer. And then of course, skill damage on a drone and turret build is just a great thing to have wherever you can get it. On top of that, this piece comes naturally with a skill tier, so you don't have to farm for anything specific. You're just looking for crit hit damage and crit hit chance in those secondary attribute slots. And then we have crit hit damage again in the mod slot. If you wanted to favor this more towards your skills, you could go with skill damage instead of one of those crit hit damage or crit hit chance slots, but personally I liked having some additional weapon damage output, as the skills are honestly doing just fine on their own. And on top of that, as you'll see throughout this build, we don't have any skill haste stacked onto this. So we have some particularly long cooldowns. So we've gone with Caesar's Guard to get the perfectly skilled chest piece talent. Skill kills have a 30% chance to reset skill cooldowns, which given how many kills these skills are going to be getting, that is not a hard thing to have ready. As you'll see later in the video, it happens quite often. And one of the things I would recommend is once you have the perfectly skilled talent procced, you'll see a little icon on your HUD. And something you can do, if you time it right, you can cancel both of your skills at the same time, reset their cooldowns at the same time, and then you refresh them both with that perfectly skilled proc. And then you can start it all over again without having to wait for any cooldown during combat. For gloves, we have our second piece of Umbra Initiative, giving us that 3-piece bonus of reload speed. And then, as I said off the top with the mask, only 2 of the 3 pieces here are rolled to skill tiers. So for the gloves, we have that natural core attribute of weapon damage, and then we re-rolled critical hit damage in that secondary attribute slot. And I'll reiterate it one more time here to try and make it even more clear. We've left the core attribute on the gloves as weapon damage. It doesn't necessarily have to be the gloves in particular, it should just be one of the 3 Umbra Initiative pieces, because we're already at skill tier 6, so there's no reason to add more skill tiers. So we can leave one of the 3 pieces as a weapon damage core and just roll the other 2. For our holster, we have the Ninja Bike Messenger Backpack's sidekick, the Picaro's holster, the named holster from Brazos to Arquebus, giving us plus 10% skill haste and, of course, plus 1 skill tier. On top of that, we have a core attribute of armor and a unique secondary attribute of plus 15% weapon damage. And then we've rolled that secondary attribute slot to crit hit damage here as well. And then here we have our third piece of Umbra Initiative on the knee pads, giving us that 4-piece bonus from the shadows into the light. And then again here we've re-rolled that skill tier because we have critical hit chance naturally rolled in the secondary attribute slot. And then finally here we get to our skills, Assault Turret, Striker Drone. They're a very common combination on a number of skill builds. I don't think I'll go into these all that much because I think you understand why they pair so well together. Both are incredibly autonomous skills that you can also aim when you need to. The turret obviously is a lot more durable, but it is stationary, while the drone flies around during combat, forcing enemies out of cover, finding enemies when they're beyond your sight line. At tier 6, both of these skills have an incredibly massive amount of damage stacked into them. On top of that, we're getting incredible damage boosts from both Capacitance and the plus 10% skill damage from the Technician and the Empress International chest piece there. So put this one together, let me know what you think in the comments below. It's obviously a different variety of an Umbra Initiative build, and it's definitely more of a hybrid build. But again, one of the things I really did like about this is it has a ton of offensive capability, as well as having some defensive acumen with that armor regen from the Umbra Initiative talent, leaving you all of your secondary attributes to stack critical hit chance and critical hit damage, giving you a surprising amount of weapon damage on top of everything else that this build provides. As always, like and subscribe if you liked the video, tell your friends about the channel to continue to help us grow and make videos like this, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.